Hi, I'm Dr. Mark Studin, and welcome back to part two of MRI spine interpretation. First, again, I'd like to thank ChiroSecure for giving me the platform for sharing this information. It's critical to our profession, it's critical to your practice, and let's get right to it. So, where we left off last time in part one is sharing with you the normal anatomy of the spine. So, right now, I want to start talking about disc bulges. A disc bulge is just that. This is a normal lumbar spine, and we know it's lumbar because we see the cauda down here. There's no solid spinal cord, and it's not the convexity of the concavity, I apologize. Right here, it's popping in. So when it bulges out, it pushes out that concavity to be a convexity. And we know it's a disc bulge because there's nothing sticking out. It's kind of smooth, it's all the way around. And usually a disc bulge is a minimum of 50% if it's degenerative, and usually actually closer to 100%. But in reality, you can have a disc bulge at less than 25% if it's a directional bulge, which you don't see often unless the patient is positioned in the tube improperly, or it's a scoliosis, or there's high-end ligament tearing, which is causing a short curve scoliosis in the spine. So, but the overwhelming majority of the time, a disc bulge is degenerative. Now, again, let's just do a little bit of anatomy. Here's your disc, and you can see the high intensity zone, HIZ, which is the nucleus pulposus, the low intensity zone or low signal, which is the annulus fibrosus. And you don't talk about lights, darks, you say high signal, low signal, high signal, low signal, and this is normal. So what we also see here, these are your neural canals. Here is your thecal sac, this circular thing holding in the cauda equina. It's like a sock on a foot. These are your nerves. This in the back is epidural fat taking up the space between the ligamentum flava and the thecal sac. Here's your facets, very clearly defined. And this is a bulging disc. So the bulging disc has lost its normal concavity, and that's degenerative usually. So we just discussed this. The red arrow points to where it bulged from going concave to convex. Now, when we look at a disc degeneration, which again is a minimum, degenerative disc is a disc bulge, synonymous. So when there's degeneration, it's a minimum of 50% of the circumference. And when you look at it, typically, the hallmark is you look right here, the neural canals, here and here. Equally, they're usually closed in. But what occurs is the disc is wearing thin, like sandpaper on wood, and the disc walls collapse. So nothing is sticking out here. You have nothing sticking out. It's pretty much uniform all the way around, and it's a minimum of 50%. Now, when we look at a herniated disc, conversely, a herniation is a tear in the annulus, a tear in the annulus, where the nucleus pulposus goes from the inside out. So when the nucleus goes from the inside out, that's a herniation. And it could sit on a nerve root, it could sit on the cauda, it could sit the thecal sac, affecting the nerve roots on the inside, it could sit in the spinal cord, it could sit anywhere inside the canal. And again, I've given you the reference for all these definitions. Now, when we look at a herniated disc, it's broadly defined as a localized or focal displacement of the disc right here, beyond the limits of the vertebral or intervertebral disc space, meaning it's beyond the limits of the bone above and the bone below. The disc material may be the nucleus, cartilage, fragmented apophyseal bone, annular tissue, or any combination there above. It might bring the bone with it, and I'm going to show you an image of that later on. The disc space is defined craniate to caudate, above or below the vertebral body, the end plates, and preferably by the outer edges. So when you get to focal or broad-based, I'm going to not read this, I'm going to show you pictorially. So when we look at a herniation, you see we showed you before it was straight across, that was a bulge. This is sticking out. And I've gone through the effort of colorizing the actual lesion for you, showing you, In this case, it's in the cauda equina. This is the lumbar spine, and it's compressing the cauda equina because it's pushing the cauda back into the ligamentum flavum. So it's pushing on top and the bottom. So this would be defined as a large central herniation, which is stenosing the central canal by about 40 to 50%, and it's compressing the thecal sac between the herniated disc and the ligamentum flava, and it's catching, you see this green line here on the right, L5, it's catching the L5S1 nerve root as it's exiting. It's very simple. You get to see all these things and see why. This is on the right side. MRI is read right and left. It's reverse. And on every image, you'll see right and left. But you get to see why your patient's in pain. And you'll be able to understand it and help them better. And you get to make a clinical decision of how you want to treat this patient. I mean, I know how I would do it, and it really doesn't depend upon the image. If they have serious motor loss or sensory loss, I'd want to co-manage this. I might not want to deliver an adjustment. I don't know if I'd want to get in there and decompress it. I'm not sure. It really depends upon the patient. I might put them on SOT blocks. I might ice them. I put them on bed rest. It all depends on the patient, and you get to make those decisions knowing what's going on with your patient. Now we've got a focal herniation, which is 0 to 25% of the circumference, or broad base, which is 25 to 50% of the circumference. Which one is worse? Well, the arbiter between good and bad of space-occupying lesions with respect to the spine is that which compromises the neurological element the most. And in this case, which is counterintuitive, is the focal herniation versus broad base, because focal usually sticks out further and catches the nerve. So the neurosurgeons all tell me focal is usually a lot worse, even though more disc material can come out in the broad base scenario. Now, here's what it looks like. Here's a focal herniation. Again, I've colorized it for you. Here's what it looks like on the sagittal or side view, and here's what it looks like on the axial or top-down view. This is a focal herniation. Now, I'm going to throw a couple of other things in there at you. This is the posterior longitudinal ligament. All this under is an epidural vein, and this is called a varix, or inflamed epidural vein. But this is focal. This is also focal extruded, but I'm going to talk about that in just a few minutes. There, and here's your filum terminale. I can't see where this almost appears. This is not like the cord's coming down, the conus medullaris. It just seems a little low. It might be, but I can't tell in this sequence. So here's your bone, here's your disc, high zone, low zone. This line going through it is normal. It's a little bit darker. It's desiccated. Desiccated means drying out. This is not an indicator of age, because all it says is the water went from here to here on the outside. That's what it means. So the inside got dark because the water went on the outside. And the water is also the same color as the inside. So this is a relatively new herniation. Here you've got a Schmorl's node, and I can't tell on this sequence if there is a bone edema, which is called a modic change. We'll get to that in a different time. But there's a lot you can't tell from just these limited sequences. As we report this, we get a little bit more funky. And we're going to say Mrs. Smith's lateral side view. This is there's a reference, here, yellow ellipse is the thecal sac. Then the green ellipse is the cauda equina being compressed between the pink posterior canal and the cauda equina, which is green. So I've actually colorized this to make it a little bit more understandable to the reader. You've got a herniation. You've got the thecal sac, which is the red. Here, well, actually, this is I just said that wrong. The orange is the depth of the herniation. The red is the outline of the herniation. The yellow is the thecal sac. The green is the neurological element. And here, the pink is the epidural fat. So we're getting to see these from two different things. And this is how I report things so people can understand. And it's really important to understand, if you look at the lesion and look at the opposing view here, it really gets quite in depth. So there's a lot going on. So when we look at this and we look at a focal herniation, and I know I just got a little esoteric with you, but I want you to see it. Let's just look at, here's a T1 weighted image where water is dark. Here's your herniation. I've colorized it for you. Here's your herniation. I've colorized it for you. It's less than 25%. And you need two views to conclude an accurate diagnosis. And this is obviously in the cervical spine because we see a spinal cord. We see a spinal cord and the nerves lining up to exit over here. And these are your neural canals. It gets a little bit crazy, but it's easy. Now we've got a C6-7 broad base herniation, 25 to 50%. And I've colorized it for you here. Here is the opposing sagittal view. Gets a little crazy, but once you see it over and over and over again, and if we colorize the whole thing, right here would be the whole outline of that herniation. But here it is causing a compression of the spinal cord because you see a little bit of CSF here. You see none all the way around. So this is compressing the spinal cord. I don't think I would touch this patient. Why? Because when you deliver a high velocity, low amplitude thrust, you create increased intrathecal pressure. You're increasing the size of this herniation where it's going to thump that spinal cord. And I don't want to do any damage to the cord. You're doing boom each time to a spinal cord. And that's very problematic. So you might want to wait a couple of weeks or a month or so. You might want to co-manage with a different type of provider, depending upon the patient's clinical presentation. Do they have serious motor loss, areflexia? You have to know how long it's been there. Are we looking at cord edema? It looks like there is a little bit of cord edema going on here because the cord's swollen. The next step from that is myelomalacia. The cord's going to start to die. So I want to get this decompressed quickly. This person might not have the liberty or the leeway of waiting so much time. And that delay can cause permanent spinal cord damage. And we're talking for the rest of their lives. And by the way, if it's early on and you want to treat it or take a gamble, that's okay. But that's your clinical decision. Me, I see cord edema. I'm getting them to a surgeon immediately, because that spinal cord's going to die. I can adjust them and I can wait and I can put them on decompression for 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 15 weeks until it comes down. I'll put laser on them. I'll do whatever I want. Symptoms might ease up. But if this is not fixed, this is going to die, literally die, and it's just not going to come back. That's a clinical decision you have to make. I've made my decision, and my decision is I want to get them after that part is fixed and it's decompressed. That's a little bit too far gone for my comfort level. This is a bilobular herniation in a broad-based scenario. And you see how crazy jagged it is? It's not like a perfect ellipse. This is a sack of jello going in every different direction. So here's what it looks like here, but here's what it looks like here. And the sagittal will help clearly define what's going on. No one image is going to give you your picture. Everything has to define what's going on. So then we look at a protrusion versus an extrusion. A protrusion is like a pyramid. Okay, and an extrusion is like a mushroom. So a protrusion is where the base is wider than the apex at any plane, and an extrusion is where the apex is wider than the base at any plane. So here we have a protrusion. The base is wider than the apex. Base is wider than the apex. Here, base is wider than the apex. We have a protrusion. And here we go again, base wider than the apex. These are protrusions. If we look at it here, here's the base, here's the apex. That's a protrusion, and it's stenosing the neural canal. And I've colorized things to make it easier for you. Then we've got an extruded disc. An extruded disc can be migrated or common unit, meaning attached, or fragmented or sequestered. They're both extrusions. So here's an extruded disc. Here's the bone, here's the bone, here's the disc, here's the herniation, the extrusion type herniation. So here's your disc level. You see these little dotted lines? This is telling you your disc levels based upon the anatomy. So if the disc material comes out and goes cephalad or caudad above or below this disc level, That's an extrusion. Simple. It's an extrusion. So when we look, this is a huge extrusion here. Here we look at it, it's extruded. We outline it, and then I give you the lines. So now you understand how to identify that. Again, a different one. Here's an extrusion. This is a huge extrusion. Look at it come down. Here is the line of the disc, the opening of the disc. This disc material has gone well cephalad. This is an extrusion. This patient had a subsequent trauma, and this literally got cut off and fell down into the neural canal. This poor woman's in exquisite pain, and the radiologist missed it, and the orthopedic surgeon missed it, and the pain management doctor missed it, and. Well, guess what? We didn't miss it. We found it, and we helped her get it fixed. She's had exquisite pain for, I think, maybe a year and a half. No one knew why. It was absurd. So this is a huge extrusion. And I'm not going to go through language with you. I'm going to take, it's just a little bit too crazy. I'm not going to get into that right now. But everything we do is referenced, everything. Here's another extrusion. It goes above and below, above and below. And here you can see it sits in the central canal and lateral recess, and 100% stenosing that neural canal. 100%. This was missed by a general radiologist in Nebraska who refused to talk to my chiropractors who I trained. And I got the guy on the phone and I told him I found it, got him to the surgeon, and I prevented his license from being lost. So here's a huge, huge, huge extrusion, and it's problematic. Now here we have a fragment. When you have a disc piece that comes out and breaks off, and it breaks off, and it breaks off, this is a fragment, okay? It's an extruded material that is displaced away from the side of the extrusion. Despite of the continuity of this, maybe called migrated, but once it is away from the body of the disc, it's sequestered or fragmented. It's still extruded, but it can never be a protrusion. It's an extrusion and it's sequestered. So here's what it looks like. This disc material, here it is, it fragmented into the canal, and you can see it down here, fragmented in. Fragmented. See that right here? This big piece is a fragment. There's no continuity with the disc. There's a lot going on back there. Not a little amount, a lot amount. So chiropractors, we can handle, most of us can handle a protrusion. Chiropractic can handle about, and this is not evidence in the literature, this is my opinion, can handle about 80% of extrusions that are migrated to common unit or attached. And pain management maybe about 30% of the time, and neurosurgeons 5% of the time. Once that's fragmented off, don't touch. Don't touch. Right to the neurosurgeon. Patient's going to be in exquisite pain. That's an easy triage. It's easy, easy, easy. Folks, this isn't hard. This isn't easy. It just takes a little bit of a focus. If you want to learn, take your camera out, take a picture of that QR code, go look up your academic choices. They're all co-taught and professored through Harvard-trained neuroradiologists, Stony Brook trained. I mean, all over the country. You get a lot of great chiropractors training as well. So we've got a lot of opportunity for you to learn, because this is easy, but it's not easy. You need to see it, but you need to understand it. And if you ever have a question, just call me. So folks, I'd like to thank ChiroSecure again for giving me the opportunity to do that, to do this, and we'll see you on the next show.